The acacia thorns scraped against Casey's weathered hands as she clung to the highest branch she could reach. Below, the spotted hyenas circled with patient hunger, their whooping calls echoing across the drought-stricken savanna. 3 days had passed since the flash flood swept through the riverbed, separating her from her troop. 3 days without the safety of numbers, without the watchful eyes of the alpha male, without her sister Django's reassuring grooming sessions. Casey was no ordinary baboon. At 15 years old, she had survived more dry seasons than most, but this one threatened to be her last. The great drought had stretched into its 8th month, turning the once lush landscape into a maze of cracked earth and skeletal trees. Waterholes that had sustained her kind for generations now lay empty, their bottoms baked hard as stone. The hyenas grew restless as the sun climbed higher. Casey knew they would eventually lose interest and seek easier prey, but she couldn't afford to wait. Her body was already showing signs of severe dehydration. Her usually glossy coat had grown dull, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. More concerning was the growing weakness in her limbs. Soon, she wouldn't have the strength to maintain her grip on the thorny branches. As the largest hyena wandered toward a termite mound, Casey saw her chance. She dropped silently to a lower branch, then another, timing her descent with the predator's movements. When the last hyena's attention turned to investigate a rustling bush, she leaped to the ground and sprinted toward a cluster of baobab trees in the distance. Her feet pounded against the hard earth, each step sending shockwaves through her dehydrated body. Behind her, the hyena's surprised yelps turned into determined pursuit calls. Casey's survival instincts, honed by years of evading leopards and wild dogs, kicked into overdrive. She zigzagged between scattered rocks and jumped over fallen logs, using every obstacle to break the hyena's line of sight. The baobab grove offered temporary sanctuary. These ancient giants, with their massive trunks and high branches, had sheltered countless generations of her kind. Casey scrambled up the nearest tree, her claws finding purchase in the soft bark. The hyenas arrived moments later, circling and snapping at the air, but eventually moved on to hunt easier prey. From her perch, Casey surveyed the desolate landscape. The familiar landmarks of her territory had been transformed by the drought. The fig trees that once provided abundant fruit stood bare and brittle. The seasonal streams had vanished, leaving only white salt deposits marking their former paths. Even the hardy marula trees showed signs of stress, their leaves brown and curled. But Casey's keen eyes, adapted for spotting both food and danger across vast distances, caught something the casual observer would miss. Near the base of a distant kopje, a rocky outcrop rising from the plain, a thin line of green vegetation persisted. Where there was green, there might be water. The journey to the kopje would require crossing nearly 2 miles of open ground during the hottest part of the day. Hyenas weren't her only concern. Leopards often used the rocky outcrops as hunting grounds, and the open savanna offered little protection from aerial predators like martial eagles. But staying in the baobab grove meant certain death from dehydration. Casey waited until the sun reached its zenith, when most predators sought shade and rest. She descended carefully, scanning the horizon for movement. The ground burned beneath her feet as she began the treacherous journey, moving from one sparse patch of shade to another. Halfway across the plain, exhaustion nearly overwhelmed her. Her vision blurred, and her legs trembled with each step. The temptation to lie down in whatever shade she could find grew almost irresistible. But deep in her genetic memory lay the wisdom of countless ancestors who had survived similar ordeals. She pressed on, driven by an instinct stronger than conscious thought. The copy's base revealed the source of the green vegetation, a tiny seep where underground water emerged between the rocks. The flow was barely more than a trickle, creating a muddy patch no larger than a dinner plate. But to Casey, it represented salvation. She approached cautiously, aware that other desperate animals might be competing for this precious resource. Fresh leopard tracks in the mud sent a chill through her already weakened body. The prints were large, indicating a mature male, and recent enough that the edges remained sharp and clear. Leopards were patient hunters, capable of waiting motionless for hours near water sources during droughts. Casey's eyes swept the rocky ledges above, searching for the telltale spots among the shadows. Despite the danger, she had no choice. Casey crept forward and began to drink, lapping the muddy water while constantly scanning her surroundings. The liquid tasted of minerals and earth, but each drop restored a fraction of her strength. She drank until her shrunken stomach could hold no more, then retreated to a defensive position among the rocks. As evening approached, other animals began arriving at the seep. A family of warthogs approached nervously, their tusks gleaming in the fading light. Several species of antelope took turns at the water, each group maintaining vigilant watch while others drank. Casey observed their behavior carefully, noting which animals seemed most alert to danger and which directions they favored for escape routes. The leopard struck just after sunset. The big cat had been lying motionless on a ledge 20 feet above the seep, invisible against the mottled rock face. Its target was a young impala that had strayed too far from its mother. The leopard's leap was poetry in motion, a fluid arc of muscle and claw that ended with the impala's neck snapping audibly. Casey pressed herself deeper into her rocky crevice, grateful that the leopard's hunger was now satisfied. The big cat would likely remain near its kill for several days, but it would also be less motivated to hunt additional prey. This gave her a window of opportunity to establish herself in the area while maintaining access to the water source. Over the following days, Casey developed a survival routine adapted to her solitary existence. She foraged during the cooler morning and evening hours, searching for any edible vegetation that had survived the drought. Baobab fruit, when she could find it, provided both nutrition and moisture. The inner bark of certain trees, while tough and bitter, contained enough nutrients to sustain her. Her most valuable discovery came on the fourth day. A colony of harvester ants had established granaries in the rocky crevices near the seep. These industrious insects had collected seeds during better times, storing them in underground chambers. Casey's nimble fingers, evolved for grooming and food manipulation, proved perfect for extracting the cached seeds. The ants bit fiercely, but the protein and carbohydrates in their stores were worth the discomfort. The psychological challenges of solitary survival proved as difficult as the physical ones. Baboons are intensely social creatures, and Casey found herself making soft contact calls into the empty air, hoping for an answering voice that never came. She began talking to herself, a behavior that helped maintain her mental stability during the long, dangerous nights. On the seventh day, Casey's fortunes changed dramatically. The distant sound of baboon alarm calls echoed across the savannah, coming from the direction of her original territory. Her heart raced as she climbed to the highest accessible point on the copy and scanned the horizon with desperate intensity. There, moving slowly across the plain, was a small group of baboons. Even at a distance, Casey could identify individuals by their distinctive gaits and postures. Her sister Django's characteristic limp from an old injury was unmistakable.